Welcome to week 12, chapter 12, remote users. As the world is changing, remote users are becoming much more common. People don't want to go into the office. It's a perk. So how do we deal with that from a IT point of view? And that's what we're going to be looking at. How do we deal with remote users, making sure they have the access when they need it and it's secure? So this is what we're looking at today. So, implement secure means for remote users. So, some of the areas we're going to be looking at how the mobile workforce has grown in recent years, remote access protocols, some virtual private. We'll talk about the VPNs. We're going to be using tokens, and we'll look at a couple different things that we're looking at. So, what is it? Some solutions. How do we get this? I know my son, he works in New York City, he lives in New Jersey, and what he does, he doesn't want to travel during rush hour, so with his boss, what he does is he gets up at 7, works for 2-3 hours, then heads into the office. And then he works till a couple hours in the afternoon, and he comes home. So he has a kind of a hybrid work schedule. He works a little bit remote and he has to be in the office. So, but he avoids rush hour. So, this is what we're looking at. How do we, if we look at the manual, it's talking about how it's changed over the last probably 5 years. As technology has grown, it's allowed us to put in remote access. High-speed internet has really made a big difference. When you're working at home, it's almost the same speed as when you're in the office. Back in the day when I started working, we had SneakerNet where we'd actually copy files to a disk drive and we walk them over. Well, we don't do that anymore. Everything is done through the internet, high speed, Wi-Fi. So this is what we're going to be looking at this chapter. How do we deal with this? How do we get people to remote? So we're going to take a look at these 4 different types. We're going to give a brief overview and then I'll get into detail on each one. Having a correct system in place is to ensure the remote access users have it available when they need it. Both IT security, we have to look at it. So we're going to look at Radius, RAS, TACACS, and VPN. And this is really the different access methods that we can have. So remote access connections usually remain open for a non-specific period of time, which causes a security problem. Remote access solutions such as VPN do not protect the computer systems. Employee may use a business laptop, personal, such as surfing the web and shopping online, which can cause issues. So we're going to take a look at some of these things in depth. But what are our concerns? We have to do a few things when we're working with remote users. Identification, are they who they say they are? Authentication, how do we know that's who they are? And authorization, what systems do they have access to? So identification is the process of uniquely distinguishing an individual. In most cases, identifications needs to provide prior to authentication in the user. Common forms of authentication, username, account number. Identification can be referred to a person, a computer system, program. So there's different ways we can identify who they are. It'd be almost impossible for a bank to know how much money you have in your account in the network if you didn't have a username and identification to go with it. Authentication is the process of verifying that users are who they say they are. Access and privileges should not be provided to the users unless verification has occurred. Authentication can make many forms when we're using this. So as you remember from a few chapters ago, something you have, something you are, or something you know. Something you have is your password. Something you are could be your fingerprints. Something you have, is your password. So these are some of the different things that you can have to log in to make sure that authentication process is working. So after you're identified, after you have your authentication, then you have authorization. And again, you got to remember, we don't have authorization to everything. We only have authorization to what you need to do your job. Once the authorization is complete, authorization can occur. Authorizations determine which actions you're allowed to use in the systems. Although you may have access, you don't have authorization to do everything. And that's an important part. You only have access to do what you need to do. So let's take a look at access protocols to minimize risk. We looked at authentication, authorization, and accounting. Remote authentication, dial-in users, that's the radius, which we use a lot, remote access servers, and terminal access control systems, plus that. So you can see that these are the different methods. There are multiple ways to get the organization can provide remote access, identification, authentication, and authorization through protocols. Some of these protocols are added in addition components such as accounting. This protocol adds an additional security remote access. So these are some of the things we're going to look at in detail right now. So AAA is a network service that provides security through a framework of access controls and policy enforcement information needed for billing purposes. So framework for multiple protocols. Radius uses AAA. So these are just some of the things that we're going to look at. Authentication, authorization, and accounting are network services that provide security through a framework of access controls and policies. Enforcement of the policies, information needed for billing purposes. The benefit associated with AAA are increased security, increased control over the networks, and capabilities of auditing your network. Employing a AAA framework within your organization enables communication between IT, multiple networks. Specific protocols can address what's going on. So basically, this allows us to have it. What is the accounting part of it? Provides the ability of the system to collect statistics on network or users for auditing and billing purposes. Accounting enables tracking of the system usage and start times. So sometimes what will happen, departments might have different levels of what's going on, and they'll be, IT can charge each department. This is what we're going to be doing. This is how we're going to be doing it. And when your users log in, they're going to pay for part of that protocol. So remote authorization dial-in user radius is a client-server protocol that provides authentication and authorization for remote users. Radius also provides accounting capabilities. Livingston Enterprise developed Radius for network access. Radius is network protocol and provides communication between network access servers, or the NAS, and authentication servers. Enterprise uses protocols to provide network authentication for the remote users, internet services, providers, ISP, and protocol and authentication users to grant access. The communication information provides information to determine what's going on. If we take a look at the diagram, here's what we're going to be looking at. The communication information identifies the type of it, and this is what it is. Manages large numbers of users. So over here we have our, let me get that going. So here's our authentication server, right? This is the one that has all our logins and passwords. But everyone's coming in, access our clients. Whether we're coming in through a wireless port, whether we're coming in through the internet, your home, or you have a dial-up where you're actually using this. You have your VPN. They all go through the Radius server, which is right here. It doesn't matter what method we're using to get into our company. All these are remote users. Here is our firewall, if you want. This is protecting us, and the Radius server sits in the middle. Our account database is over here, but everything has to come through here before it gets to our network, which would be over here. That's basically what this is doing for us. So remote access server, or RAS, provides authentication for remote access to the internet and dial-up scenarios. A user connects to the RAS and his credentials are compared against the database. If the credentials match, authentication has occurred and the user is granted access to the network. Users and systems remote access for gaining access to specific networks. It's necessary to implement strong security when using the RAS. Often organizations forget that modems are connected to servers and assume other safeguards such as files will protect us. That's not always the case, so we need to make sure that the users follow some basic rules. No inappropriate or unknown access should be provided through the remote access server. Authentication must occur for all users before access to the network or computer system is provided. Authorization for the user must occur, which ensures that the user or computer systems are not performed on there. So basically, it connects, give them credentials, and then they have access to only the area that they need to be. The Terminal Access Control System, which is a by Cisco proprietary, developed to provide access control users for routers, networks, and that uses TCP to ensure message delivery, separating authentication, authorization, and accounting. It encrypts everything. Basically, it's a client-server protocol that was developed to control who could dial up or use dial-up lines. Dial-up network consists of end nodes, routing nodes, and links. Routing nodes can connect dedicated lines or accept dial-up lines. A tip in a routing node that accepts dial-up was formed to follow the tip to accept a user's name and password and send a query to the authentication server, which would then either deny or approve the request and send it back. Determination of who is allowed or denied access determined by administrator. For example, you might only could be worked between a certain hour, so we can limit the time who can get onto it. So if you're before 8 or after 5, you might not get on. Some authentication means that identifying that the users are who they are, supports a variety of authentication methods, user ID, password, PIN or token, or challenges. Authorization identifies what a user is allowed to do. Authentication provides stronger system security but not required. Therefore, the authentication control performs that. Accounting logs the user in and what they're working on for a particular time. Accounting records, this way they can charge the appropriate billing. So the difference between Radius and TACet. So transfer protocol uses user datagram protocol, where the others uses TCP/IP. Encryption, basically Radius is only password, where TAC is the entire package. And authentication does pure, it checks. Radius is not considered pure, and TAC, as you can see, is considered pure. Radius and Terminal Access are both client servers providing AAA capabilities. It's important to understand how the two approach differ, ensuring Radius and Terminal Access both use TCP/IP. Radius uses UDP as a transport protocol. Terminal Access uses TCP. UD is connectedless protocol and therefore a package drop and are not protected by the network. TCP, connected orient protocol, and therefore acknowledgement is sent after the request has been received to make up for the deficiencies. So there are some of the differences. So remote authentication protocols, point-to-point protocol, challenge handshake, extensibility authentication. When implementing Radius or Terminal Access, authentication protocol must be in conjunction with the system. You have learned about a few of the remote authentication protocols available. PAP, CHAP, and EAP. Password Authentication Protocol. PAP is a data link protocol that provides authentication over point-to-point protocol. Allows the internet connection to occur over the line. Transmission TCP/IP traffic. Provides identification and authentication in users. PAP established identification with a peer using a two-way handshake. Standardization. Challenge handshake protocol, which is CHAP, occurred in 1996 by the RFC 1994. CHAP provides authentication over point-to-point protocol. 3 handshakes to verify description of the handshake. So basic, it's going to look like this. The authenticator sends a challenge message to the client when the link is established. This challenge is unique in the session. The client responds with a value, the value which was created using a one-way hash function on a combination of fields. The authenticator compares the response with the value in its known calculation of the hash. If the value matches, it allows it. Extensible authentication protocol is a framework that establishes multiple authentication mechanisms over the wireless network point-to-point protocol. Standardizations of the EAP occurred in 1998. And basically, in the EAP over radius environment, the radius client communications with the system's request authentication, EAP with radius servers. So the handshake method is two-way for PAP, three-way for CHAP. And the password is clear text, where in CHAP it is a hash value, which is just a single value run through an algorithm. So how does this work? If we look at the client, they want to get over to the radius server. They want access to the client. Computer initiates connection with the radius, and the two systems agree upon the EAP. The radius clients request that the client computer to identify itself by sending EAP request identification message, and the client computer responds with the EAP response. The radius client creates an access request message containing the client computer. It sends it. The radius server responds with the access challenge message that contains the EAP message requesting that. The radius client removes the radius details to the client, and then the client computer responds with the authentication request by passing the EAP message through the radius client to the radius server in similar fashion. The radius server replies with either an accept or access accept or access reject message, and this allows us to connect. So let's take a look at VPNs, or virtual private networks. They're a secure connection over the internet. Security over VPN is provided through encryption. It's a tunneling. It kind of pokes a hole right through the internet so no one can read it. It's a point-to-point tunneling, two tunneling layers, two tunneling protocols, and internet protocol security. As we looked at in Chapter 11, VPNs are a way for remote access to gain secure access to a corporation. It's a secure connection over an unsecure network, such as the internet. Communication provides through VPN. Through the internet. The VPN establishes a private network over a public network, such as the internet. Instead of dialing in over the telephone line, VPN uses the internet connection that systems has already established. As previously discussed, remote users may benefit from the internet connection because they might be faster. They were either at the local coffee shop, hotels, airports. They're pretty much all over the world right now. The connection is beneficial when you want to do personal work, such as checking your personal email or you're checking your bank account or something of that order. Organizations are not inclined to leave their infrastructure open. Organizations want to ensure that the internet is available only to employees. So we're going to make sure that we only use it when we're to protect the data. So some virtual private networks require tunneling. Some protocols that we use, point-to-point tunneling, as we discussed. Protocol, it's developed by a group of vendors, standardized in 1990. And it creates, if you think of it, just as a pipeline through the internet. Layer 2 tunneling protocol, or LTTP, provides the same functionality as PPTP, but on networks other than IP when combined with the IP. The Internet Protocol Security Protocol provides the method of establishing a secure channel. The security association you use for each device during each VPN connection. The SA is the record of the configuration that the device needs to support the IPsec. An Internet Key Exchange. So these are some of the connections that are used for VPN. Web authentication. Web authentication is ensure users who they are. Web authentication is needed in situations where virtual private networks is not available. This may occur if the user may have a secondary system such as a customer's computer or a computer kiosk provided at a hotel. Implementation of the web authentication method is determined by the risk associated to be accessed. A user ID and password is the basic form of authentication that you have seen multiple times in this chapter. High-risk application should not be used for ID. One-time passwords is a method that might be used. Knowledge-based authentication. Knowledge-based, this allows the web authentication mechanism to use real-time as a question and answer. These questions and answers are obtained from public records or private data warehouse, such as the Credit Bureau. The question consists of information. What is the license plate of your 1998 green Camry? So these are just questions that you see that allow us to build that information. What are some best practices that we need to look at? Determine the risk, select remote access options, determine the appropriate level of authentication, ensure systems are accessing the network, and ensure protection. Remote access controls for the remote users is not a new concept. They have been used for many organizations for many years. Some best practices regarding remote access controls as follows. Determine the security risk associated with the remote access. Understanding who will be working remotely and what tasks will occur assist in determination of that security. Select the remote access option. Once you have determined the risk with that option, you can decide the best remote access for that level of risk. Encryption required for full communication or only communication and encryption. Determine the appropriate level of authentication based on security risk. The level of risk associated with your system will determine the level of authentication required to keep the system safe. Can a user ID password combination be used for authentication in multiple things? Ensure that the systems are accessing the network and they met the protocol, the policies of the organization. How will remote access users work? Will employers provide systems, or will they have their own computer systems? If the employee has their own, does it have access to the network? Will personal computer systems have appropriate software and patches installed? And what about the protections? After determining the level of risk associated with remote access and choosing the solution, you must provide the system to who will have access to it. So what did we look at? Some methods of remote access. So remote access management, remote implementation, security. Basically, we focused on security considerations for remote users, as this is a growing population. There are many security risks associated with this and the implementation which can be addressed. With the right protocols and access control, employing a AAA framework can help ensure the network is configured to support the chosen protocols. So that's what we looked at. So remember to smile, have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon.